All right, everybody, welcome to our first video for induction. This video today is going to be about the structure of the document-based lessons available on Stanford History Education Group's website. Just before we get started, I did want to let you know that the purpose of these videos is not to give you more work at home, but really just to give you the information that you need ahead of time so that when we're meeting face-to-face, we have as much time as possible to collaborate and work together to produce some lessons that you can take back with you into the classroom. So this is Stanford History Education Group's website. They have lots of different document-based lessons available for you to use in your classroom. The purpose of these lessons is to engage students in historical inquiry where they're reading, writing, and thinking like historians. And the reason that I really love these lessons is that they're really engaging and they get kids doing the work of historians. They're engaging right in disciplinary literacy. Every lesson is going to focus on the historical reading strategies, sourcing, contextualization, corroboration, and close reading. And instead of memorizing facts, students are going to be evaluating the trustworthiness of multiple perspectives on historical issues. And they'll also learn how to make historical claims that are backed by evidence that they find in documents. So like I mentioned, this is a website. You do need a username, so make sure you sign up. It's free. And then once you're in, you're going to click on the Reading Like a Historian curriculum. On this side toolbar, you'll see introduction materials, which I'll talk about in a second. There's U.S. history lessons and world history lessons as well. So under the U.S. history lessons, for example, you'll see all of the lessons. They're organized chronologically. So for the purposes of today, we're going to take a look at a lesson plan for early U.S. history about loyalists. So right at the top here, you can see the central historical question: why did some colonists support England and oppose independence? Now, every lesson follows a pretty similar structure. I do want to mention that you can modify these into Word form so that you can manipulate them really easy. All you need is an account on Adobe, and I can also do that for you. If you don't have that account, I can convert these into document form for you so that it's a lot easier to modify. And they want you to do that. They don't want you just printing off these lessons and saying go. You should modify them and make them work for you and your kids. So, like I mentioned, every lesson follows a three-part structure. Starts with the central historical question. This question is going to guide the entire lesson, how students read the documents, how they discuss, and what they discuss. And then each lesson has different documents. Some might have 3, some might have 4. This one has 2, which I'll show you in a moment. The first thing that you'll do in terms of instruction is normally establish some type of background knowledge, and it's pretty scripted, so they tell you what you want to make sure that you mention to your kids prior to the lesson. A lot of times there's some type of warm-up activity that you could do as a warm-up or do as a class discussion. And then after you go over the background information, you're going to head right into reading the documents. Sometimes they will have you model the first document. Other times students will just start reading, and you might choose how they do that, whether they're doing it in groups or pairs or individually. And then they're going to be answering some guiding questions after that. The final component of the lesson plan is the whole class discussion, and they give you guiding questions for that discussion as well. And this is really, really important for the overall purpose of the lesson, and often teachers eliminate this section because of the time constraints. But you don't want to do that, because this is where you can really show students that history is open to multiple interpretations and that the same piece of evidence can support conflicting claims. So it's really important to maintain this in your lesson plan because it's going to help them understand their role as knowledge makers in the classroom. Now, I do want to mention that not all of the lessons will follow this format. There's 4 different types of lessons. This one, for example, is a pretty straightforward lesson plan where you're going to give some background information, they'll read the documents, you'll have a discussion. There's also inquiry lessons where students will develop a hypothesis to support a particular topic. There are structured academic controversies, or SACs, and that's where they're getting a topic and they're going to either be defending or refuting it, and those are really fun in terms of small groups. There's also outs, or open up the textbook, where students will be corroborating a textbook entry about a historical event and the primary source documents to see what's similar and what's different. And there'll also be lesson plans that tell you to explicitly model historical thinking skills. They'll always tell you in the plan of instruction. And then often too, with this background knowledge section, they'll give you PowerPoints, timelines that you can use, as well as videos. So you have to read through the lesson plan prior to figure out what you're going to do and what you might want to adapt. So if you scroll down in the lesson plan, you get the documents. So often they're already modified for you. Again, you can modify them further, and we're going to talk about this next week, but you can modify them to become simpler for your students. The website also has I'm just going to move this for one sec. The websites also have the original documents available. So you can see here, you can download the original documents, and that way you can give those to your students if you feel like they're really ready for that. And then at the bottom are the guiding questions that students will answer as they read documents or after they read the documents. Sometimes it's in this graphic organizer format, sometimes it's just in a list form. Again, you can change that to make it work for your kids. Next week, or not next week actually, in our first face-to-face meeting, we'll be talking more about how to modify all aspects of this lesson plan, modifying the central historical question, how to modify the documents to make them more accessible, modifying the questions that students will be answering, adding in instructional activities to this plan to make it engaging and accessible, and then we'll also talk about some discussion strategies and assessment opportunities that are in each lesson. My recommendation is to start with a intro lesson. These are usually kind of fun because they're not necessarily historical topics, which, not that history isn't fun, but kids think it's a little bit different because it's kind of something that's more real life for them. So these will introduce them into the historical thinking skills. For example, they'll be corroborating stories about what happened in a lunchroom fight. So my recommendation is, if you haven't used these already, I would start off with one of the introductory lessons. They're really great in just getting kids interested as well as invested in what the historical thinking skills are and what they can do for them as students and future citizens. So to follow up with this video, I do want you to fill out a quick Google form. I have emailed this link to you. So if you could just fill out the 3 different sections of the Google form for me. This last question, what I'd like you to do is go back to that website and under whatever content area you are, US if you're US, or civics or government, and then world history, if you could choose a lesson that you will be teaching between October 26th and November 30th. And all I need you to do is choose it and then write it into the Google form. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to group you guys for that first face-to-face so you have other people to work with that might be doing a similar lesson. So if you could fill that out, that would be great. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. Otherwise, I hope